This is a 1958 Fiat Abarth Zagato 750 GT Corsa. This is a 1958 Fiat Abarth Zagato 750 GT Corsa, variously known as the Double Bubble or DB because of the distinctive styling on top of the car there with the double bubble. But in my family, it was just known as the Abarth. And my dad bought this in 1958 after having become enamored with it and found one for sale and bought it and started driving it for everyday use as well as for racing. He was in a car club. They raced slalom and various other things. But he raced it, and then he also just drove it for everyday use as a commuting car. If you've been in the car, it's not the greatest commuting car. It's a pretty bumpy, firm ride. It's super loud. It's hard to have a conversation, but he loved it. And I have really distinct memories of this as a kid. The engine has a very distinct sound to it, and it's loud. My sister and I, as little kids, Dad would like to play pit stop, like we were a pit crew, and he would have us push the car out of the garage because it was so light, two little kids could do it. And we would get it going fast enough where he would then bump start the car and take off and go to work. And I have really distinct memories of that, and it's super fun. But tell me how you first got interested in the Abarth as a car.
I was driving to school one day on Sunset Boulevard, and I noticed this unusual looking car on there, and it fascinated me, and I tried to follow it, and I eventually just lost track of it in traffic. And shortly, it could be weeks, months thereafter, in Westwood, which is right next to our campus, I actually saw an Abarth. It might have been the same one for all I know. And so I actually pulled into the parking lot of the gas station and waited for the guy to come out back to his car. And so we talked a little bit, and I asked him what kind of car this was because I had never seen one before. And he explained it, and so I noted it, the make and name and all. And shortly, months thereafter, after I had graduated, I saw an advertisement in the newspaper for such a car, the Fiat Abarth Zagato. So I drove down to Italia Motors and walked in, and the guy who owned it was a guy named Brumby. And so I talked to him, and I said, "I'm here to look at the car you have for sale." And he said, "Oh, too late. I just put it on a car carrier headed for Monterey." So I said, "Oh, bummer." Well, at the time, right with him in the shop was another guy, and his name turned out to be Perry Perrone. And he said, "Well, I have one in my garage." And it turns out that Perry Perrone was a driver for Brumby and his cars. And he said, "And we're thinking about selling it, so if you want to come out and take a look at it." So we drove out to the valley and looked at it, and it was in his garage. And when I finally decided to buy it, then my sister, Lily, had to drive me up there, and so I was able to drive it home. And it became mine. And as soon as I got home, I was still living at home. And my father was very upset that I was being a car so conspicuous in its ancestry, and because it had big numbers on it, bright red car with white, black and white numbers on the side. So he was very upset.
This one is super unique in that it was a competition car, and by competition I mean racing. It was specifically built for racing. And there were only about 25 or 30 of these competition cars made, from what I'm told. And some of the unique features of the competition car were the windows. All the windows except the front window were made of plexiglass to allow for lighter weight. There's a larger gas tank and also a larger radiator to help accommodate for the heat of racing. In fact, there was actually two radiators, from what I'm told, one in the rear engine compartment and a second one that hung underneath the car. And I actually asked my dad about it, and he remembers that radiator being on the car when he bought it, because every time he drove over something, he bottomed out on it because the car's so low. In fact, he says he took it off at one point because he thinks he actually tore it off by going over a speed bump at some point in time. So he just eventually took it off of the car because it wasn't super practical for everyday driving. You have another really fun picture here from 1959 with the Abarth and your dad's Cadillac.
Yeah, this was the painting the extremes shortly after shortly a few years after the Gardena house. My father built his house just a few blocks north of the Gardena boundaries in LA City County, I guess, county property. And the house was 116th Street, I guess. And so my father had finally reached the apex of his ambitions. One was to get all four kids out of college, which hadn't quite happened yet, but pretty was goal. Build his own house and buy a Cadillac. So this was his Cadillac, and it's probably the biggest one that's ever been made. And I decided to just put the picture of my Abarth next to his to get the extremes of car sizes. And so this shows not only in the width but length. And it turns out a few years later, when I got married, my father was driving possibly even a bigger Cadillac. And so we drove it on our honeymoon.
There's a really great photo of him driving in a slalom course and getting on two wheels. It's kind of grainy. It sort of has the Loch Ness monster quality to it, but you can see the car up on two wheels because it was caught from a distance. So we have this infamous picture of the two-wheel. Where did that come from?
That was one of our competitions that we had. It was a club event, as I recall, yeah. And it was, no, it wasn't. It was an open event, and I entered it as a competitor. And it was on the parking lot of a grocery shopping center. It happened to be a very diminishing eight, and the sharpest turn happened to be, I was turning right, and when you turn right, the lowest amount of weight is on the upper part of the car, which is not the way you want to make a right-hand turn. And so the right side of the car lifted up, and my face was almost touching the asphalt. I think I might be able to reach my hand out the window and keep the car from rolling over. So anyway, but it did come back down on four wheels, and thankfully I didn't have to do body work to get that pounded out.
So when the guys from Vintage Underground came down to actually look at the car for the first time, they were kind of like kids in a candy shop, like I said. They were walking around the car and pointing things out to each other. They were super excited about it. And one of the things that they pointed out to each other was this logo right here on the front. They had said that it was a little bit like urban legend. They heard that it existed, but they had actually never seen one themselves. So when they found it, they were clamoring over it and just really taking it all in and really enjoying the fact that they finally had seen one on a car. So probably in the late 2015, early 16, the car found its way to my house because my dad had driven it for years just as a commuting car and just at some point just put it away in the garage and didn't drive it anymore for commuting. And it sat there for years and years, and nothing had been done with it. None of the fluids had been emptied out. It hadn't been put up on blocks. But it worked when he put it away. So we were fairly sure that it was going to work again when we restarted it. But the carburetor was all gunked up. The brakes were all seized up. So it took some doing just to get it on a flatbed and get it to my house. And like I said, I think that was in 2015, 2016. And then I didn't know anything about cars. My dad did all the wrench work on this himself. And while I watched him occasion, I didn't really know how any of it worked, but I thought, how hard could it be? But what I found is that I would spend more time on the internet researching how to find parts than actually working on the car. Because it was a custom built car, there were so few of them, parts were very hard to find, and I just couldn't find them. And so I kept looking, and I finally thought, man, I need some help. And this place called Vintage Underground up in Eugene, Oregon kept popping up every time I did internet searches as a place that had restored several of these vehicles. And so I thought, I need somebody like that just here in the Bay Area that might point me in the right direction to source out parts. So I emailed these guys from Vintage Underground, and I got an email back right away from one of them saying that they were actually going to be in town the next week, and could they come and look at the car? And so they came and looked at it the next week, and I showed it to them. And like I said, they were kids in a candy shop. They were so excited to see it. I had told them that it was in good order and that the body was good. And they told me that they've heard that a million times, and usually it's just junk. But this was so well preserved, there wasn't any rust on it. They were really, really surprised to see the condition it was, especially having it just sat in a garage for so long. So we talked about it. They asked me what I wanted to do. They asked me what my budget was, which was only like $10,000. And I told them I just want to get it running again. And they had told me that if they wanted to do a full frame off and everything, and it was going to be so much more expensive, but they thought they could get it running and up and going for the $10,000. And they were really wanting to be a part of the history of the car. They actually said that. It's like, if you couldn't tell, we just want to be a part of the history of the vehicle after such a great story. As you can see from the car, again, it's not a full frame off restoration. It's not show quality or anything like that. But the trend during that time was to actually have a car that looked like it belonged from the 1950s. So it has some patina to it, if you will use that terminology from antiques. And that is kind of a trend, and thank goodness, because I didn't have the money to restore the whole car anyways. And that people actually fell in love with all the character markings on the car, the dings, the little bit of the faded paint, and all the rest of the things that go along with a car from 1958. And they said, yep, it looks great because it looks like it's from 1958. So he showed it there, and then he brought it back to me, and we unloaded it. And it was so cool to be able to see it come off of this truck and actually hear it start for the first time, because it has such a unique sound. And once you've heard it, you can't forget it. And it was so cool to hear that. It brought back a flood of memories from my childhood of hearing the car. And I'm thinking of my dad every time I hear the car, which is super cool.
Okay.
You got anything else to say?
No, well, I hope it hangs around and brings a lot of fun to people in the future.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that.